Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to be talking about,
Scholarly impact.
yeah, scholarly impact and sort of some assumptions we make about what that means.
Right.
And we're going to be looking at an article from 2012 called "Scholarly Impact Revisited" by Herman McGinnis,
Guinness.
like the beer,
Psych the beer.
and a whole team of other researchers.
Yes.
So what are we looking at today? What's the big idea here?
So often we think about impact as one single thing, right? And this research really digs into how we measure that impact. And what they found is that there's a real difference between who's considered influential within academia and who's making waves in the wider world.
Yeah, that's right. Like a lot of times we assume that the most influential scholars are also the ones having the biggest impact outside of the academic bubble, right?
Exactly. And this study really challenges that assumption.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. How have we traditionally measured the impact of a scholar's work?
So the classic measure is citation count. Essentially, how often other academics reference a particular piece of research in their own work. It's kind of a closed loop, right? Academics building on each other's work, and it really reflects influence within that academic community.
Right, so you publish something brilliant, other scholars cite it, and that bumps up your impact score.
Yeah.
But this study went beyond that, right?
They did. They wanted to understand impact beyond that closed loop of academia. So they turned to Google search results, specifically looking at how many pages on the web, excluding those .edu domains, mention a particular scholar.
So instead of just looking at who's citing whom in academic journals, they looked at who's being talked about in the real world.
Exactly. They wanted to see whose work is breaking out of that academic bubble and having a broader impact.
I like that. Okay, so walk me through how they pulled this off. I mean, sifting through Google results seems like a pretty massive undertaking.
They were very meticulous. They used scholars' full names and quotation marks for their searches. They even compared results from Google.com and Google.eth to check for consistency and make sure they weren't missing anything.
Wow. They didn't just trust the algorithm. They really rolled up their sleeves and got into it.
And to be extra sure their data was reliable, they repeated the entire data collection process, wait for it, 4 times.
4 times.
4 times. They were committed to accuracy.
Wow. Okay, so after all that, they had a mountain of data. What did they find? What's the headline here?
Here's where it gets really interesting. They discovered a low correlation between citation count and impact outside academia. In other words, being a superstar in your field doesn't guarantee you're making a splash in the wider world.
So you could be a rock star in the academic world, highly cited by your peers, but virtually unknown outside of it.
Precisely. And digging deeper into those Google results, they found 2 key factors that seem to drive impact outside academia.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat here.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, first of all, it seems that publishing in activities geared towards a non-academic audience, things like books for the general public or articles in popular press, have a big impact.
So it's not enough to just publish in prestigious journals. You've got to find ways to connect with the rest of us mortals.
Right. And the second factor is media attention and engagement from external stakeholders.
Interesting. So it's about getting your work out there in a way that people beyond your academic circle can understand and engage with. But I'm guessing this also led to some pretty dramatic ranking differences.
Oh, absolutely. They looked at the 384 most cited management scholars from 1981 to 2004 and compared their citation rank with their non.edu Google result rank. You wouldn't believe the difference. On average, there was a difference of 100 positions.
100. So you could be a top scholar in your field, but practically invisible to the outside world. That's got to sting. Do you have any examples?
Plenty. Viswanath Venkatesh, for example, he was ranked 27th in citations, putting him in the top 30, but his ranking based on non.edu pages. A dismal 308th.
Wow. So much for academic stardom, translating into real-world impact. Anyone else?
Isaac Azan ranked 3rd for citations, but when it came to those non.edu pages, he was all the way down at 273rd. And Bruce M. Kogut 8th in citations, but only 267th in terms of broader impact.
It's amazing to think these academic heavy hitters could be so unknown outside of their fields. But I'm guessing there were some scholars who managed to make an impact both within and beyond academia. Tell me there's hope.
There is. The study identified 40 scholars who ranked in the top 100 for both metrics.
Okay, so these are the real all-stars. The scholars who've managed to bridge that gap between academia and the wider world. Who are they? Any familiar names?
You might recognize a few: James G. March, Michael A. Hitt, Walter W. Powell. Michael E. Porter and Susan E. Jackson are just a few who made the list.
Interesting. Now, I'm curious, is there a pattern in terms of where these folks are doing their research?
Well, one thing that jumps out is that a whopping 40% of these top 40 scholars were affiliated with just three universities, Stanford, Harvard, and UC Berkeley.
Wow, so not only are these institutions attracting some of the best and brightest, they're also fostering an environment where those scholars can make a real impact, both inside and outside of the ivory tower.
It definitely raises questions about whether certain institutional factors play a role in nurturing this kind of dual impact.
That makes sense. It's not just about individual brilliance, it's about the context in which that brilliance can flourish. Now, given this gap between citation count and broader impact, I'm wondering, does this gap seem to be narrowing for newer scholars? Are younger researchers doing a better job of bridging the science-practice divide?
Unfortunately, the data doesn't seem to suggest that. The authors found that the number of years since a scholar received their doctorate didn't have any impact on the relationship between citation count and non.edu impact.
So the gap isn't simply a matter of time or experience. There's something more fundamental at play here, something about how we approach and value scholarship itself.
Exactly. And it's not limited to specific fields either. Whether a scholar focused on organizational behavior strategy management theory or HR, the disconnect persisted. And membership in the Academy of Management didn't seem to make a difference either.
So this isn't just an issue for a particular generation of scholars or for those working in a specific area.
Mm.
It's a much broader phenomenon.
Mm.
But this brings us to a really important question, doesn't it? What factors drive impactful scholarship beyond the academic bubble?
That's a big question. Yeah. What can we as scholars and researchers do to make sure our work makes a difference? Not just in academia, but in the wider world.
Yeah, it's a question we all need to be asking ourselves. And in this study, I think, gives us at least one answer, which is we need to find ways to engage with those non-academic audiences.
Right. So we need to think about how to translate our research into something that, policymakers, practitioners, the general public can understand and connect with. Exactly. Think about writing op-eds or blog posts, giving public lectures, or even working with, journalists and media outlets to share those insights. It's all about breaking out of that academic echo chamber and making our work visible and accessible to a wider audience.
And even more importantly, making sure that our work is relevant to the real world, right? So connecting our research to actual problems and solutions that people care about.
Absolutely. Impactful scholarship isn't just about generating knowledge for its own sake. It's about using that knowledge to make a positive difference in the world.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. I think it's really made me think differently about what it means to make a real impact as a scholar.
Yeah, it definitely challenges us to, go beyond those traditional metrics and consider those broader implications of our work.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a really important question to think about. What can you do to make sure your own work makes a difference, both inside and outside of your field?
A great challenge for all of us.
It is. So as you go about your work this week, think about how you can bridge that gap between academia and the wider world. Because ultimately, knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and applied to make a positive impact. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.